gold trails and ghost towns. Share the adventures of our early pioneers as we explore the development of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. With your host, Mike Roberts, and historian Bill Barley.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts with Bill Barley, and we're talking about, of course, the riches of mining in British Columbia. Today, I thought we'd done the best silver mine in the world already, but you think this one is better, is the best?
It's the best mine in Canada, one of the best mines in North America, perhaps the best mine in North America, not generally known, sometimes even in British Columbia. It started in 1892. Still going in 1993, over a century, the magnificent Sullivan mine in Kimberley, East Kootenay country.
Now, how would a thing that became this magnificent be so poorly well known? I mean, how come people didn't know more about it? What was special about this mine that kept it hidden under the bushes?
Well, Mike, it got off to a rocky start, and remember that in the 1880s and 1890s, in the turn of the century, there were many mines in that corner of British Columbia, the southeastern corner of British Columbia, that were world beaters because their ore averaged in some cases 2 or 3 ounces of gold, hundreds of dollars per ton, sometimes thousands of dollars per ton. So that it didn't really make, but this was a magnificent producer. It was a mountain of ore.
And it had staying power.
It had staying power galore.
Okay, take a break. We'll be back, though, to talk about the famous, the magnificent, the overwhelming Sullivan mine. Gold Trails and Ghost Towns, Mike Roberts and Bill Barley, and we're talking about the Sullivan mine today, and as you indicated in the opening, maybe one of the reasons this never sort of became a real prominent, at least a much discussed mine, is that there were so many others around it doing so well.
That boundary, West Kootenay, East Kootenay country, was studded with mines. And if you take a quick look at it, and we'll take a few of the towns and a few of the mines that made that area famous. Certainly you start at Camp McKinney, which is in the far western part of that district.
Gold.
Camp McKinney, sure. This was a gold camp, and it was a gold mine, and of course the Caribou Amelia was the great mine. Then you move down that Kettle Valley and you get into Greenwood, and you had the Dominion Copper Company smelter there, and you had Deadwood, and you had the Providence mine. Silver mines in there, right in Greenwood itself, mostly silver, a little bit of gold, a little bit of copper.
Yeah.
Move up the hill to Old Phoenix, which is, once an incorporated city. Gone now, Mike. Completely vanished. But it had, the old Ironsides, it had the Knob Hill, had a number of other mines, mostly copper with a significant amount of gold. Yeah. Then you went right through that boundary country, a lot of other small mines like the Union, go right over to Rosslyn, and this was the golden city of the Old West in the 1890s.
The gold was so rich in there. Oh, yeah. I mean, how rich was it? Can you describe it?
Probably $150 million came out of Rosslyn, which is a heck of a lot. And you had massive mines, mostly on Red Mountain as well as OK Mountain region, but you had the Leroy, you had the famous Center Star, the War Eagle, the Nickel Plate, the Josie, the Black Bear, the White Bear, the Brown Bear.
You name dropper, you.
Yeah.
And you guys, Nelson's not far away.
Well, Nelson, of course, was there in the 1880s, discovered by the Hull brothers, and that's the famous Silver King and the Kohinoor and the American flag, and massive silver in that area. But then you go all the way through that Kootenay country, go up into the Slocan, into Slocan City, which was a very picturesque town and a real city in the early 1900s, and the Ottawa and the Arlington and all those mines up there. Then you go up the valley up into Silverton, you get into the Standard and the Hewitt and the Van Roy. And those were all silver mines as well, you see, silver, lead, and zinc.
Yeah.
Then you jump up into that pass country up there, and you come to famous Sandon, which is derelict town.
The gem of the silvery Slocan.
Sure, it was a bona fide city, several thousand people, Mike. And you had the Rico, and you had the Silversmith, and you had the Slocan Star, and you had the Noble Five, and it went on, scores of mines in there. Almost all silver, high-grade silver, up to 2,000 ounces per ton. Spectacular. Then you jump right over to the Kootenay Lakeside, you get into Caslow, and Caslow, of course, led right into that Whitewater area, and Nashton, and
Ainsworth.
Oh, yeah, well, we get there after, because it also led into the Lardo. So you run from old Caslow, which was kind of the shipping point, the division point, and the distribution point. You go right into Camborne, and and then that was the Nettie L and the Silver Cup, and then that's That's Ferguson, Nettie L. and the Silver Cup. Then you get into Camborne, you'd have the Eva and the Silver Dollar and mines like that. Gold and silver up there. Then you go down south from Nelson, and you get right into, as you mentioned, you get into Ainsworth, Mile Point, and Let Her Go Gallagher, and a lot of very, very famous silver mines in there. Then you go down a little farther down the valley, you get down to that Weimar country, and you had one of the premier mines of the British Empire at one time. That was the Weimar mine, and a whole bunch of others, you know, the Yankee Girl and so on. And so that was, and the Fern, that was a rich gold mine as well. Then you go down from there, you get down to Salmo, and right out of Salmo was that Sheep Creek country. The Mother Lode and the Sheep Creek mine and the Nugget. And then you jump over in that East Kootenai country, and that was a little later in coming because people tended to concentrate in the West Kootenai boundary. Then they started drifting over to that East Kootenai country, and the first mine that really became, I think, famous there, of course, was the marvelous St. Eugene at Moyer, discovered by an Indian, named the St. Eugene, and it was the premier silver mine in that East Kootenai country for several years. Very, very high-grade silver, concentrated ore zone, and because of that, basically because of that, miners began to gravitate into that East Kootenai country. And one of those miners, rather interesting, was Joe Bourgeois. He had discovered Red Mountain and all the mines in Red Mountain, along with Joe Morris, another French-Canadian. And an interesting thing, Mike.
Well, having discovered something as big and rich as that, I mean, was he fixed for life, or was like so many miners who just did it, made it, lost it, went after more of it?
He always had money. He always had backers. We don't know how he did. I've tried to trace him. I've been unsuccessful. To trace some of his history, not all of it. In the 1880s and 90s, most of the great discoveries were made by Irishmen or French-Canadians in British Columbia.
And here's Bourgeois.
And here's Bourgeois with another French-Canadian particle.
Now, where is he going? The St. Eugene attracted him. Now, where did he go?
Yeah, he's following the North Star, I think, because he goes north.
Kind of a celestial guy, is he?
Yeah, he is indeed. Well, the other mine he named the Center Star. Remember that, Mike?
Yeah.
That was in Rosslyn, that was on Red Mountain, and all that galaxy of mines up there. So he follows the Center Star and gets up an unnamed creek, quite far north of Moyer, actually. Creek is called Mark Creek. And he starts prospecting on one side of the creek and comes across a massive deposit of silver, lead, zinc. He can tell at a glance, he's an experienced miner, that this is very, very good silver property. He made a slight mistake. The great prize lay just across the creek. So he stakes this mine, which he calls the North Star.
The North Star?
Yeah, and the North Star became, again, a premier producer, but it didn't really last. At the same time, almost the same time, summer of 1892, 10 Irishmen band together, and they fan out through that country, and a lot of the ground is staked, and the North Star staked. They go across the valley, and they discover a massive body of zinc, lead, and silver, in about that order. Well, zinc, problem with zinc, it's a penalized ore. They had to separate it from the lead and the silver, and it cost a lot, so you were given a penalty if you sent that to the smelter. So what they did is they actually divested themselves of this property. And the interesting thing was that the guy who was leading the expedition was a guy called Pat Sullivan. And Pat Sullivan was one of these miners who was a bit fey, shall we say. And he had a recurring dream that happened time and time again over the years that he was going to die in a cave-in. So they staked this ground. Now, Burchett said they went back to stake the ground because he left a compass there. I frankly think that was after the fact. Sullivan was the leader of that party. He was the acknowledged leader of the party. He then drifted on to Idaho, not thinking that the Sullivan would ever become...
Because it had this zinc problem.
That's right,
okay.
Because of the problem. And he was caught in Idaho in a cave-in in a mine in Idaho.
And was killed.
And was killed, exactly as he had pictured it in that recurring dream. And the other 10, or the 9 of the 10 who remained, were given $10,000 for their discovery. Now think of it, $10,000. And they then sought out the widow of Pat Sullivan, who was in Ireland, and made sure she got to the penny the $1,000, which was her husband's share.
What an honorable thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
indeed.
they could have just spent it, and who's to know?
Yeah.
But they followed and paid her off.
That's right.
Well, that's wonderful. So who was the person who, despite the zinc penalty, picked up this wonderful load?
Federated Mining and Smelting Company, a United States firm, actually picked it up, or federal, and they picked up the mine, and they had a lot of trouble with the zinc again. And so they sent it to 2 smelters. One smelter, Hall Mine Smelter in Nelson.
Hall Mine Smelter.
Yeah,
okay.
That was because of the Silver King. And the other smelter was the Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company smelter in Trail, BC.
Now, these 2 smelters were built to handle primarily all the stuff that was coming out of Greenwood and Phoenix and Rossland and
sure,
all of that.
But they were also they handled that zinc ore and that lead ore and that silver ore coming out of the Slocan as well, and out of the Lardo. So they had some knowledge, and there was considerable rivalry. That's giving it a very, very soft connotation between the two camps.
And Hull and Consolidated.
Oh, you bet. And according to the story, the Consolidated solved the puzzle around 1910. Now, that will be disputed by a number of scholars who say it was not the Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company, who said it was Hull Mines. And there was a...
And now, do you say maybe it was Hull Mines, but somehow Consolidated got it, or are you not going to go that far?
I'm not saying that it was industrial espionage, but I'm saying that there is some...
Loose lips sink ships.
There is some indication that perhaps something happened in that area.
Okay.
We will kind of just... We will concentrate on that and elaborate on that at some future time. Anyway, they solved it. They had an option on the mine.
Consolidated solved it.
Yeah, they had an option on the mine. They might buy it from the American company, and they now are able to resolve, separating the zinc from the lead and the silver.
And once they can do that, you've got 3 metals that you can sell and no penalty anymore.
Oh, yeah, no penalty at all. And what happens, of course, is they start diamond drilling into this mountain. This is not a separate ore body. Some of these ore bodies are 300 or 400 feet thick. It is absolutely staggering to mining men everywhere. They couldn't believe how massive the ore body was. Now remember, this was started in 1892, so they spent 15 years resolving the zinc problem, and then they come into a massive ore body, and they keep on drilling, they keep on hitting ore. And they start out with a few hundred tons a day, and then they get up to 500 tons a day, then they get up to 1,000 tons a day, then they get up to 2,000 tons a day. By the 1920s, they're at 5,000 tons a day. They're at 2 million tons a year. Now, only mining men will recognize how massive that output is. Some mines that became world famous never produced more than 200,000 or 300,000 tons. They're producing 2 million tons a year. And they've done this right from the 1920s approximately, right into the 1990s.
That would be 200 million tons a year.
Well, no, it would be. It would be 2 million tons a year. Over the life of the mine. Over the life of the mine, probably around, it'll end up around 200 million tons. Now, it's got to start, because the CPR, remember, was closely linked with the Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company. So they ran a branch line, 1900, from Cranbrook right into Kimberley. And past the old Marysville smelter, which was there to sort out and smelt the ore from the North Star mine, which never really got off the ground, never proved to be feasible. And, of course, now, the massive company. And remember this, the Consolidated Mining Company has a very interesting career. One of the mining giants of Canada, not much doubt about that. If you were brought up as a kid in that East Kootenay, West Kootenay, even the boundary country, when anyone mentioned the company, there was only one company. That was the Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company. Some people call it the CM&S. Today it's called Cominco. So it had 4 names, the company. Consolidated Mining and Smelting, CM&S, and Cominco. And that mine was so rich. Ordinarily a mine, when you go into a mine, you'll have a stope and a pillar.
A stope is a tunnel that tunnels into the ore body, and a pillar.
And a pillar to hold up the ceiling of the stope so it won't cave in on you.
Yeah.
Well, there was so much ore in that mine, it was incredible. The stopes were huge, so they actually built cement stopes so they could mine out the stopes that had all the ore in them. So in that mine, you'd go in and see the big cement stopes. And remember, some of these miners, when they were barring down in that mine...
What is barring down?
That means breaking away the loose rock so it doesn't come down on your head.
That's what these guys in this picture are doing. They're standing on ladders,
standing on a ladder.
Down.
This is about 1930s.
Look at how high that ladder is.
Sure, 50 or 60 feet. And when you look at that, the early years, of course, they hauled out all this ore by wagon load. And then we have, here's a picture of one from the lower level up to Sullivan, and here's a wagon load of ore going out. This is very, very tedious. But as you go along, here's another photograph, which I think is very explanatory. And here's a crew of miners going into the Sullivan, into the main portal, and the date on it, right on, is 1915. And that's when the Sullivan, they start to realize by 1915 that this is going to be a world beater. And when you say world beater, you have to compare. You can compare about 3 or 4 places in the world. Broken Hill in Australia. They said the Sullivan would never match Broken Hill, Australia. Broken Hill's been shut down for years. It was a great silver lead zinc mine. Couldn't touch the Sullivan. Look at the Comstock load. The Comstock
in Nevada.
Load. In Nevada.
Yeah.
It's just staggering. didn't even come close to the Sullivan. It's been closed for years. The only one that's comparable is the Sunshine Mine in Idaho, and that's produced probably close to 400 million ounces of silver. But their ore generally was not as rich, because that ore in the Sullivan had a little bit of silver, not as much, naturally, and it got poorer with depth, the old Kootenai curse, but it had so much lead zinc in it, it was actually staggering. It was straight ore. It was straight ore.
So do you know how much the Sullivan has produced in silver at this date?
No, I tried to find out from Cominco, and they didn't have the exact figures. I would think the North Star produced 25 to 30 ounces per ton for years. It was just across the valley. Certainly the Sullivan was not the same type of ore body, much less, probably an ounce or two a ton. But if you take a look at, if it produces 200 million tons, an ounce or two a ton, I'm guessing here, it would be between 200 and 400 million ounces just in silver alone. Of course, the massive profit came from lead and zinc. And the interesting part of Kimberley, and Kimberley was the camp nearby, it started out as a very, very small camp. And here we have a photograph of Kimberley in the beginning.
Underwhelming.
Yeah, it is really underwhelming. A couple of stores there waiting for the rush to happen. And this was it was a company town, like Trail is a company town. Yeah. So Kimberley's a company town, and you had the company store. In fact, here's a photograph of the company store, the CM&S store. And they made sure that they not only made it mining, but a little bit on the miners as well. And so Kimberley never did achieve the notoriety of its namesake in South Africa. It was named by Colonel Redpath, by the way, around, I think, 1893.
Now, that name comes right out of Spokane, doesn't it? The Redpath, sure. So that's Spokane mining wealth?
Sure. Spokane mining wealth with all the mansions in Spokane. He was in there early. He thought it would match the gold and diamond output from Kimberley in South Africa. Wrong. It outlasted them all. So this is a mine that really staggers the imagination. There is no equal anywhere in Canada.
Okay, let's take a break, and we'll come back and talk a little bit about the stuff we haven't touched on yet to do with Kimberley. We'll be back right after these words. I'm holding a piece of silver lead zinc ore from the Kimberley mine, and this piece, now see if we can get the size of this. The tunnel into which they mined to get this was all ore.
All ore.
Everything, and you said that some of these veins were 300 feet thick.
300 feet thick. I mean, it was just staggering. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of miles of tunnels in that area.
And it's all ore. They didn't have to put it through dead ground.
On the Sullivan sign, it's virtually all ore. There would be exceptions. But, you know, they thought the Sullivan was going to last till the 1940s. Then they thought it was going to last till the 1950s. Then the 1960s. Then the 1970s. Then the 1980s. It's the 1990s, and it's still going. And there's an old saying in the Kootenai country, Mike, especially which really adapted to the CM&S, when in doubt, fall back in the Sullivan. And that's a fact.
And they did, and they did.
Well, sure they did.
Decade after decade.
Yeah.
And here it is. The concept that there is a hole in this mine that's the size of a 30-story building boggles the mind.
Oh, yeah, sure it does. Sure it does. And, you know, what amazes me is when we're talking now, and there are people whose great-great-great-grandfathers worked in that mine, and they're watching this program. The mine is still going on. That's staggering. And, you know, what it really means is that this country is a fascinating prospector's dream. I don't care whether you're...
Think there's another vein like this hanging around that they just haven't stumbled on?
Yeah, that has been the dream of many a prospector, many a lode prospector in this area. But certainly, as far as a placer man is concerned, you know, if you want to take a look around for some interesting ground, I would head not down to Wild Horse, which is very close by, Wild Horse Creek, discovered in 1864. I would head into Perry Creek. And Perry Creek is fascinating for several reasons. There is gold on bedrock in Perry Creek. The bedrock is deep down, and the Jordans found that out, and other people who tried to plumb the depths of Perry Creek. Quicksand down there, and 7 runs of gold. The gold disappears at about Sawmill Creek. The Montezuma Tunnel that comes into Perry Creek, and I know it well, carried interesting gold values. And where the gold came in, they haven't been able to trace it. Now, the other interesting thing about that, Mike, is this, is that somewhere between Perry Creek and northward, towards Kimberley, there is a recurring rumor and a tale of a lost high placer gold area in there. And I've talked to several miners who have indefinite, and I do mean indefinite, details of it. But it's intriguing enough that, and there is high gravel up there, and there's alluvial gravel or wash gravel in the upper reaches of that area. So I would think that if I were young and if I were 25 or 35 years old or something, I would kind of wander through that country and dry pan in that area.
But I would hazard a guess that Consolidated Mining and Smelting and those people have it all tied up. I mean, do we go to the local mines office and say, where are the claims staked and where's the dead ground?
Now, the Consolidated Mining and Smelting generally will not touch placer ground. They've been burned too often. They were burned in that Caribou country. They were burned in the Atlan country. They didn't make any money in placer ground.
Stay in lead.
Placer ground is an imperfect science. When you've got a mountain like the Sullivan, you can fall back in that. You can't always fall back in placer ground.
Yeah. Now, Kimberley. Now, you said something at the beginning of the program, and surprising, we haven't talked much about the town. It's sort of I mean, right now it's a ski town. It's in those beautiful Rockies and that high mountain, the Purcells. And was this? Maybe we never got struck with the romance of it because it was such a company town. I mean, it was under the thumb, it was under the control of one group.
Yeah, certainly. The Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company controlled the destiny of the town. And the town itself is still a fascinating town. Of course, I have a kind of predisposition to like mining towns. I've been brought up in a number of mining towns. And I think that the mine is winding down, not much doubt about it, Mike. And the Sullivan will come to an end, but what a magnificent story.
Yeah. We're also observing, as you described all of these towns, all of these camps that arose for silver, copper, gold. I mean, there they are, and they're on the Canadian side of the 49th parallel. You don't have to go far south to find nothing. I mean, we really lucked out in this regard.
Yeah, we did, except for that panhandle of Idaho where you get that area around Wallace and in there.
We would have given them Roberts Bank or Point Roberts in exchange for that panhandle.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
And, of course, around Republic as well. But generally speaking, I mean, look at Phoenix. Phoenix is a few hundred yards north of the 49th parallel. Not the only one either.
So we usually specialize in ghost towns in this program, but today, no ghost town, still a flourishing mining community right now.
Yeah, sure. It won't go the way of Camborne or Ferguson or Sandon or Camp McKinney or Phoenix. Those towns are long gone, different era, different times. And I think that Kimberley has a story that we probably should have got to sooner than we did, Mike, but I'm glad we finally got it on the...
Well, probably the whole story of the Sullivan mine has not been told. We've been using the mining records over the years, but a fascinating story. Join us next time for Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Bye-bye.